Hi there, my name is Hussein. Hello, my name is Hassan. Welcome back to another episode of Cheel's podcast. And if you are new here, it's about different cities and cultures from all over the world. This episode is about Miami. Miami is a metropolis located in southeastern Florida in the United States. It's a major center and leader in finance, commerce, culture, arts, and international trade. Miami is nicknamed the capital of Latin America and is one of the largest majority-minority cities in the United States. Please enjoy. Hello, Davi. Good evening, I guess, now.
good, good evening to you both, Hassan and Hussein.
Yeah, it's good morning here in Tajikistan, but it's good evening in Miami, right?
Yeah. I mean, actually, it's more like good night because after we finish speaking, it'll be bedtime for me.
Wow. Okay, how are you doing, man?
I'm doing very well. I mean, I'm excited to speak with you both, and um, I have a lot of new things in life right now, so I'm super excited to be kind of in this next step, this next stage of my life.
Cool. Could you please talk about yourself a little bit for our listeners?
Yeah, absolutely. So, I actually was born and raised in Miami. My
Hmm.
family, they immigrated to the U.S. To Miami in the 1960s. My family's from Cuba, and there was a lot of
Hmm.
political changes that happened in Cuba. With Fidel Castro taking power and such, and so both my mom and my dad, and their families, they migrated over to the U.S. Separately. I mean, my parents were kids actually at the time; they were teenagers, and essentially, my sister and I were born and raised here. And I grew up in a pretty low income home, really. So my both my mom and my dad, working class, hard workers, and so I actually, the first time I left Miami was to go to college. I studied hard and I was able to get some scholarships, and I went to school, and I've actually since then I've been able to travel to so many different places and countries. I've been able to see the world. I've been able to understand different cultures and groups of people and be able to have really great conversations. And yeah, and actually, it's full circle because I just moved back to Miami. I was living in China for 2.5 years. And so it's been 17 years since I left Miami. So this is full circle now. Get to come back.
Wow. How different is Miami now?
Oh, like from when I left?
Yeah, 17 years ago.
Yeah, wow. It's interesting because it's hard to tell how different if the difference is based on on me or on the city itself. When I left Miami, I was an 18-year-old boy essentially. I was off to college, and now I'm coming back as a 35-year-old, So, in many ways, not a whole lot. The city still feels very familiar. And I think part of that is because I've visited so often. My family still lives here. So, I've visited every single year, essentially, since I left, sometimes multiple times a year. But, I can't say I've seen a whole lot of changes. I mean, I think that there have been some demographic changes slightly, but yeah, I mean, when I think about the city, it's largely the same. It's like the comfort zone to come
Hmm.
back to the familiar.
Hmm. How big is the influence of Latin America in Miami?
Yeah, that's a great question. Miami is a really unique city in the United States. Obviously, the United States is quite big, and there's all kinds of different demographics and cities and such. But I would argue that Miami is perhaps one of the most unique cities because it's a majority minority city, meaning that the majority of the city is non-white, at least not non-Hispanic, not like non-Hispanic white.
Mm-hmm.
The influences is huge. I mean, starting from, I mean, even before the '60s, but throughout the decades, we've seen different waves of immigration from various parts of Latin America, not only from Cuba, but from Nicaragua, from Brazil and Venezuela, and also other parts like non-Spanish speaking countries. Like I said, Brazil already, but also a lot of the Caribbean countries. So Haiti in particular, and Jamaica, the Bahamas, other Caribbean nations. Um, and we see it in so many different aspects. Obviously, you have the cultural aspects like food and such, and you have language and religion. But people also, when they've migrated, they bring their politics, they bring some of their habits, even things like, how they construct their cars, their homes, or how they drive. Maybe some of their, ideas about the world and behaviors. So,
Mm-hmm.
yeah, and you see it a lot in different parts of Miami. So even within Miami, obviously you have different kind of enclaves or different cultural groups will live in different parts of the city, and they, you can see those differences.
Yeah. And Miami is mostly known for its party scenes and beaches, but there must be something else interesting. I mean, what do you think is underrated about Miami?
Oh, well, let me tell you. Yeah, I mean, Miami's certainly known for its beaches and its nightlife. Those are kind of the two staples. But the Everglades, actually, I mean, in general, nature, I would say, like a lot of its natural beauty. But in particular, we have three national parks. So in South Florida, so Dry Tortugas, Biscayne National Park, and then perhaps the most famous is the Everglades. And
Mm-hmm.
it's a really unique place because I'll give you some examples. So it's the only place in the world where crocodiles and alligators live in the same waters.
Wow.
Yeah, and then in our natural areas, you can see so many different interesting species that are either unique or special to South Florida and Miami. So like flamingos and peacocks. We have manatees in the ocean. You can see dolphins if you kind of take a trip out into the ocean. And so yeah, that's not typically the first thing people think of Miami, and yet, in my opinion, it's among the best parts of the city.
Mm-hmm.
And for those who don't know what the Everglades are essentially like swamplands. So it's a natural habitat where you have kind of murkish water, and parts of it are brackish, meaning that the water is kind of half salt, half fresh. It's like mixed, and so that allows maybe fish or wildlife that either have require fresh water or salt water. They can coexist in that area.
Oh, wow. Yeah. Part of the beaches, and what do you think? What else might surprise foreigners if they visit Miami?
Yeah, one of the things that a lot of my friends, when they've visited, they've said is how little English is spoken. um, you know,
Yeah.
in most parts of Miami, I mean, people do speak English, but actually, two of the cities in Miami, which is Hialeah and Hialeah Gardens, are respectively like the top three, two of the top three cities with the highest concentration of Spanish speakers. If you go to McDonald's, I always tell my friends, if you go to McDonald's in many places of Miami, they won't talk to you in English. So just assume you know Spanish, and they'll ask if
Mm-hmm.
you wanna, if you, what would you like to order in Spanish.
Yeah.
And not just Spanish. I mean, other languages like Portuguese and Creole are spoken here. Some other things that I think people might be surprised is that most locals don't live near the beach. In fact, many of us, we may go months and months without visiting the beach.
Mm.
For example, like me and my family, we live about 40 for 45 minutes away from the beach.
Mm-hmm.
Although we do live close to water, but not necessarily like South Beach or Miami Beach.
Yeah.
And then a few other things that people might be surprised is, there's a lot of bad drivers here. It's a pretty aggressive city in how people drive.
Mm-hmm.
And one more thing I'd say is because this is a subtropical, like the climate is subtropical. Actually, it's the only subtropical climate in the U.S. So it's a pretty, in terms of like climate wise, it's very different from the rest of the country. And so, one of those things that I think people would, surprised by is how many interesting fruits there are that people maybe don't see in any other parts of the country. Like, we grow naturally tons of mangoes and papaya, soursop, guava, coconuts. I mean, there's just so many kinds of interesting fruits that you would only see maybe in Latin America or in the Caribbean, in the tropics, or maybe in like Southeast Asia, like Thailand or Philippines, that you don't really see in other parts of the country.
You said sour sop. What is that?
Soursop is actually it's a type of fruit. It's a type of fruit. So in many countries in Latin America, they know it as guanabana, but in English, the name is soursop, and it's essentially actually, it's considered a superfood, and there's been kind of a movement to consume more soursop, more guanabana. But it's a green, kind of spiky fruit, and inside it has. It's kind of hard for me to describe the flavor. It's white and it has black seeds inside, but it's kind of like a nutty, sweet flavor.
So it's not sweet,
Yeah.
it's sour.
No, well, it's more sweet. There's definitely a bit of sourness to it, but no, it's not a sour fruit. It's not a citrusy fruit like you would like pineapple, for example.
I
It's
see.
more of a sour. Sorry, it's more of a sweet fruit. Yeah,
Oh, interesting. Yeah. And
yeah, yeah.
yeah, we heard that um, people are good dancers there. Yeah, are you all good dancers?
Every single person. Um, no, there is definitely not, I mean, there's definitely a cultural element. A lot of the Caribbean cultures, a lot of Latin America. One of the important elements or predominant elements of our different cultures here is music, and it's particularly playing it, singing it, and dancing it. And so while not everyone is a dancer,
Yeah.
you
Yeah.
do tend to see a pretty vibrant culture around music and people dancing, and a lot of like nightlife and nightclubs, and also like like dance schools, people that want to learn, and like take actually myself, like I've always danced, I've always loved to dance, but I actually took dancing classes when I was a teenager because I really wanted to kind of become a professional, or not professional, but I wanted to become more of an expert. And then I ended up teaching
Yeah.
myself. I was a dance instructor for 5 years. So I guess I fit the mold.
Oh, I didn't know that about you. Yeah. So next question. Okay.
Yeah.
If you could choose three aspects of your culture to put in a time box for the future, what would you put in it?
This is a great question. I think there's three things. The three things that I would want to put in a time box are, when I think about it, are three things that maybe are unique to our culture, but also things that I particularly value. And so the first one is our music, which we just talked about. Um,
Mm-hmm.
and when I talk about my culture, obviously I'm mostly talking about kind of Cuban American culture. I grew up in the U.S., families from Cuba, but I more so identify as like pan Latino, Caribbean, and Latino as a whole. So it's kind of hard, especially in Miami, to separate those three things. So
Mm-hmm.
when I talk about our music, it's not, the same thing happens, right? Like salsa, for example. Which is one of the most famous types of music, isn't just Cuban, right? Colombians have salsa, Venezuelans have salsa music, Puerto Ricans have salsa
Mm-hmm.
music, and so I think it's indicative, it's reflective of Miami, where it's kind of mixed, and we kind of all are together. But the reason I choose music as the first one is that there's something really special about Latin music. It's one of the earliest examples of how European instruments, like the wind instruments, like trumpet, brass instruments like the trumpet and the guitar, for example, were mixed with African percussion, right, of the drums
Mm-hmm.
and such. And so that blending, right, manifested, or it became kind of a lot of the music in Latin America, and the music that we listen to today, right, where when you think about previously, there really wasn't that mix. It was in the New World, right?
Mm-hmm.
Through why we say New World, quote unquote. It wasn't a New World, but when the Europeans kind of arrived, in the Americas, and then
Yeah.
brought African slaves. Anyways, so that's a really part of our important part of our history. The second one I would say is maybe more philosophical, but it's the enthusiasm that we have. Like, Cubans are pretty
Oh.
passionate. We're really loud. We're really passionate people. We wear our emotions in our shoulder. And
Mm-hmm.
I like to think they're pretty charismatic, and so that enthusiasm, I think, is something that's special and important. It's been important in our
Yeah.
success. And the third one is the recipes of our foods. Obviously, food is how so many people connect within families, but also across cultures. And so I'd like to put a recipe book of maybe some of my mom and my grandmother's best, foods. Definitely a lot of different beans and a lot of the desserts that we have.
Mm-hmm.
So those would be the three things: music, enthusiasm, and recipes.
Oh, yeah. Good. And what about machistas? Is that right?
I would not put those in a time box, but I would maybe put in a book of how not to treat women and how not to
Yeah.
act.
Yeah. For some of our listeners, can you explain what is that?
Machismo. Yeah, I mean, essentially, machismo is I mean, it depends on kind of how you frame it, but it's the idea. It's gender roles, right? So it's
Uh-huh.
this inherent inequality between men and women, and this machistas are men who maybe believe that women have should only behave or act in certain ways, and
Mm-hmm.
might treat them accordingly, or expect men and women to act in certain ways, and some of those ways tend to be maybe pretty chauvinistic, or maybe expect women to be at home, and not launch their
Yeah.
careers, things like that. Just kind of gender
Mm-hmm.
inequality, or gender roles. Yeah,
Yeah. It
very
sounds
Tajika.
yeah, it sounds so Central Asian, you know. It's the same here.
Yeah, I bet. Yeah, I mean, and it makes sense, gender roles are cultural, but in our history, right? In our histories, Europeans, through the Silk Road and through different various exchanges, right? We've kind of swapped cultures and then expanded them around the world, right? Through European
Mm-hmm.
colonization and such. So yeah, it makes sense.
Yeah. Um, you have traveled a lot, and what culture besides your own do you admire and why?
Oh, that's a good question. I mean, to be honest, I mean, when I've gone to different countries, I've been able to really immerse myself, and I find that every place I've gone to has been pretty special and interesting. I noticed that, so many of us have similar struggles, and we're thinking about similar things, and even if we carry about our life in different ways. But, I gotta say, I particularly really, really admire, less about a culture and more about a group of people, and that's Black and Indigenous people. So Black
Mm-hmm.
folks, and I think of, like, Indigenous folks, like different like American Indians, and Indigenous people in Latin America, and in Asia, because I admire them because of their resilience and strength. You
Mm.
know,
Yeah.
we've probably, I know we know this, but we especially saw it, in 2020. Racism is pervasive. Racism and prejudice, discrimination against people of dark skin. It's not just
Mm-hmm.
in the U.S., it's around the world, and I've seen it, and it affects, human psychology. It affects our health, our economic and social power. the opportunities we have. And so when I think of people of color, right, not only are they having to endure the everyday struggles of life, but they also have to endure racism on top of that. And so I really admire their strength and resilience.
If a group of people just came to your hometown from overseas, what advice would you give them in terms of to go to try something to be careful of?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. First things first, as soon as you get out off the airport or however you arrive, go to a Cuban bakery. You know, honestly, the bakery culture here, like the bakery movements here, is pretty big in Miami. I haven't really seen that anywhere else. In practically every shopping center here, you can go to a bakery, and I don't know. There's a unique vibe to them. I think Cuban pastries are pretty amazing, especially if you like really sweet food. If you don't like super sweet food, you might find it a little too rich. Um, as far as where to go, there's some really interesting neighborhoods so I'll talk about like maybe five or so. The first one is South Beach. So you go to South Beach for the beaches, the architecture. Actually, Miami Beach and Miami have a unique architectural style called Miami Modern. And I guess for all intents and purposes, it's kind of like mid-century modern. There's also elements of Art Deco from the 1920s. But anyways, South Beach is the place to go for that. Wynwood is another district, a fairly new arts district, but it's where you go for interesting art and murals, and also some nightlife. And then you have Little Havana and Little Haiti are
Oh,
two neighborhoods, and respectively, Havana's the capital of Cuba, so that's kind of the cornerstone of Cuban history and heritage in Miami, and then Little Haiti for its Haitian culture. And then I guess the last one, sort of neighborhoods, would be downtown and Brickell. There's also kind of the center, the cultural center, right? A lot of museums, also performing arts centers, and then nightlife. And then, other than those neighborhoods, the last thing I'll say, Miami is generally a safe city. I know that there's different shows from the '80s and such where portrayed Miami to be a really violent place and such, but
yeah.
you know, it's generally a really safe city. But we do have to say it is in the U.S. and it is a metropolitan area, and with that comes definitely some crimes and some risks. So it's important. I would advise listeners to obviously travel, with someone. Like, don't walk alone in a street you don't know at night,
Hmm.
especially at night. Maybe don't accept, if you're, for example, if you're at a bar or anywhere, really don't accept drinks or food from strangers. You never know, if those drinks or food may be laced with something. And then, drive safely. Miami I think is a pretty dangerous city as far as accidents go. And so making sure that, you're really cautious about if you're driving, or if you're walking around or biking, being careful of drivers.
Yeah, you said people are driving dangerously. Is it about men or women as well?
Oh, bad driving sees no discrimination based on gender here. It's everyone.
Everyone, I agree. Yeah, because in our country,
It's
it's
it's everyone.
usually men, right? Yeah, it's usually men. Women are more
Oh,
careful, and yeah, it's safer with
yeah.
them.
Yeah. Yeah. To be honest, I don't. There might be some interesting statistics around that. I haven't seen the stats, if it's like gender based or even like age based or
Hmm.
cultural group based. But what I can say is, yeah, like there tends to be like maybe like young kids that like to speed a lot. So sometimes you'll be on the highway and you'll see kids, like,
Yeah.
people speeding at like 120 miles per hour, which I guess would be like, what, I don't know, like 180 kilometers or something per
Hmm.
hour, 150, I don't know the
Wow.
conversion. Sometimes it's opposite. People are driving too slow, or they suddenly just stop in the middle of the highway, and you're like, "What are you doing?" Yeah,
Shooting a movie.
yeah, maybe shooting a movie. Exactly, exactly, for the next, like, Fast and Furious or something.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. You mentioned that it's hot and the weather is nice all year round. And in terms of the holidays or maybe something else, when do you think is the best time to visit Miami?
Yeah, definitely. I would tell people personally not to come in the summer.
Why?
Miami, yeah, I mean, Miami is. Here's the thing. Okay, the short answer is anytime is great for Miami. Okay,
Hmm.
Miami is a fun city with many festivals all year round and such. But it's wet season in the summer, so it rains a lot. Especially
Mm,
like in July. July is super rainy, and it sucks if you're coming for you want to be outside, you want to go to the beach. You know, it's really hot, really humid, and really rainy. So
yeah.
the winter tends to be dry season, and it's very mild weather. Like it typically winters here in Celsius is in the low 20s, low to mid 20s. I mean, so that's it's really good to visit.
Hmm.
Not only because it's cooler, but it's also drier, so you have more chances of sunshine. Also, in the summer and fall are hurricane season. And
Oh,
so it's not, it could be that a hurricane might be coming our way when if someone's visiting in the summer or in the fall.
wow.
Yeah. Yeah. But as far as visiting otherwise, like I said before, there are many great festivals that happen year round, like in all parts of the year. So you have like Gaiocho Festival, like cultural festivals. You also have like Miami Beach Pride, and there's a lot of music festivals. I think the most popular is Ultra Music
Hmm.
Festival. There's also like culinary festivals like Spice Miami and such. So there's like really good things to do year round.
Yeah, I see. I also heard that it's it's quite common among the people in Miami that they use a lot of hand gestures. Is that true?
Yeah, yeah. We I think we are an animated and very gesture friendly culture. We tend to use a lot of our hands to talk,
Hmm.
and yeah, one of the things that we actually make fun of each other for is when we like want to point at something, we can also
Yeah.
even use our lips. We
Wow.
even use our lips to point.
Ah, wow.
Kind of hard for listeners, maybe hard for listeners to understand without
Hey,
seeing it, but
so
yeah.
if you want to say on the left, you just show with your lips, like no,
On the left,
like
yeah, like
lips.
over there. You just literally point. Yeah, you point your lips like over there.
Wow.
Just maybe listeners can just imagine me literally like puckering my lips out, pointing to the left.
Yeah. We have seen the same thing in the Philippines. It's quite common. They just show with the lips. Yeah. They don't say just show. Yeah.
Yeah.
Even yeah. That sometimes they don't even say anything. They just yeah. You have to see
Just-
that. Yeah. You have to. Yeah. You have to see that.
Yeah. Yeah. I think it might come from the fact that a lot of Latin American countries, particularly maybe warmer climate countries like the Caribbean and such, were
Hmm.
very we're very emotive, meaning like we communicate and express our emotions. We externalize them a lot, and so
Yeah.
when that happens, one of the ways that we use one of the things we use to emote is our hand gestures and our facial expressions.
Hmm. Yeah. We
Yeah.
love the way you explain everything, because when we were in Shanghai, you used your hands, and it was, I'd say, maybe it make clear, yeah, the way you were passionate about
Yeah.
something. So we could see that, yeah, the things that you are explaining right now.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, that makes sense. Maybe you guys have some personal experiences when we were together, so yeah, absolutely.
Great. Yeah. So, David, how people can find you if they have any questions?
Oh, yeah. So, if anyone ever wants to contact me, I love making new friends. Feel free to chat with me anytime. So, I think the easiest way is Instagram. My Instagram handle is
Hmm.
Davier85. That's my name, which is D as in dog,
Hmm.
A, V as in Victor, IER, and then
Hmm.
85.
Wow. Mm.
So that's probably the easiest way. But yeah, I don't know if there's any other way that would make sense.
Hmm.
to communicate. That's typically the easiest.
Yeah, cool. And is there anything else you would like to say or we didn't mention but important to know about Miami?
I think it's a pretty happy place overall. I think that people would really, if people want to have a unique or interesting experience in the US, I think Miami certainly captures an essence that no other city in America does. And I've heard it time and time again that people consider that Miami is the capital of Latin America.
Oh, wow.
Right, like when we think about regional capitals, like major cities that are hubs, Miami is the financial, economic, social, and even cultural capital of Latin America. Not just the Spanish speaking part of Latin America, but also like Brazil that speaks Portuguese, and a lot of other like Caribbean nations. This is really kind of the hub, and that's pretty special.
Oh, wow. Cool. Thank you so much, Davi. It was so nice to talk with you. So many new things also we learned.
Yeah, yeah. Likewise. I'm really, by the way, I'm really impressed and proud and excited for the good work that you all are doing to continue to help connect people and educate people in ways that are honorable, right? To local communities. So helping to elevate stories through personal stories, right? From people who actually live and are part of those communities. So thank you.
Well said. Yeah. Yeah, thank you very much, Davi. Thank you.
Yeah, no problem.
Thank you so much for listening to our podcast. If you have any questions or comments, you can send us an email at theachieves@gmail.com. And you can find us on all the major podcast platforms like Spotify, Google, Apple Podcasts, Castbox, and so on. Until next time, goodbye.